Hello, good evening, and welcome. I'm Simon Bestwick.
And I'm Gemma Files, and this, of course, is No
No.
Darkness But Ours.
Before we start, this is interesting because it's almost now 2 years, not quite 2 years, but in a couple of months it'll be 2 years since our very first podcast. And we did that first podcast, we opened that first podcast by acknowledging Gemma's having won the Stoker Award for her story collection, and me bemoaning the fact that I still hadn't ever fucking won an award for anything of mine. And nearly 2 years to the day on, we are celebrating the fact that Gemma has won the Stoker Award for her story collection. And I'm still bemoaning the fact that I have never fucking won anything. But congratulations on winning the Stoker again for Blood from the Air.
It was an incredible blessing and amazement. And, you know, John Padgett, again, you know, needs all my gratitude, as you know, and Jesse Pepper as well. Peeper, I don't know. Pepper with only two P's, not three. Who is the guy who designed the art for both books, and you know, one way or the other. I was saying to people that the thing that really amazes me is that from the very beginning of my quote career, my stories basically fall into two categories. And one is super dark, urban, and, you know, kind of cosmic horror, whatever, more like In That Endlessness or End. And then there's all the rest of the stuff, which is gothic, poetic, odd, weird, with a big W sometimes, and maybe just weird. And that goes into stuff like Blood from the Air, which is the book that just won. And pretty usually there'll be, you know, one that hits and one that doesn't quite, and one that hits and one that doesn't quite. And it almost always, you know, Kiss and Carrion is in the first category, Dark is Better, In That Endlessness, Spectral Evidence, they're all in the first category. Drawn Up from Deep Places is in the second category. The Worm in Every Heart is in the second category. And for me, Blood from the Air is in the second category. And I am amazed that people have accepted me, not just at my haunted Airbnb-ness, but also at my John D. Insect Angel, claustrophobia, horrible child abuse-ness. So, you know. Yeah. So that's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
And we're here to talk about a very dark film, lit and fig, pitch fucking black. It is amazing.
Absolutely. And before we start, I'd just like to say a big thanks to Keir Waller and Rebecca Cherry at Strike Media for giving us a sneak preview of the film, giving us a chance to talk about and review it.
Yes.
And this film is called The Moor.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's one of these things where it's going to be an interesting one to talk about because we really don't want to give too much away about how frigging awesome it is, but obviously we have to make you aware that it is awesome and give you some idea of what you're in for. So without any further ado, first of all, here's the trailer. If you're listening to this on our podcast, you'll have to put up with just the visual, the audio, but we'll put a link to the trailer that's in the podcast description, or you can watch us on YouTube. So here's the trailer.
There's a child.
Do you really think Danny's up there on the moor?
She's hiding.
There is something to find here. I know there is.
She's scared. She can't remember.
What can't you remember?
Silent. No voices from the
This place just feels familiar, like I've been here before.
Can't remember her mummy and daddy.
Ellie, 8, 9, 7.
Where's my son?
You need to help me now, Dad.
Something out here. Something old, terrible.
All she remembers is dark. Can you show me your hiding place?
So, yeah, I mean, the minute that I saw that, I knew, somebody directed me to it on Twitter. I knew this For You film. You will like this film, or you will want to see this film at any rate. Standing stones, weird petroglyphs, peat bogs, the gigantic, desolate landscape.
Yeah, and it's
folk horror.
Yeah, and it's a landscape I know. I mean, I grew up in Manchester, so I've been out to this part of the world. I mean, where it's filmed is kind of like, funny enough, it's actually a similar neck of the woods to where The Hollows is set, the Peak District, which is kind of where Lancashire and Derbyshire and Yorkshire kind of abut. It's, there are these big, bleak, open spaces, and there's a lot of places where you sort of almost, where human civilization can almost seem like a kind of a very thin sort of trace or patina that could very easily rub away. And of course, in one part of the Peak District is Saddleworth Moor, and I think one of the things, and this is probably a good place to jump into. The film essentially begins with a young girl sort of engaging the help of a younger friend. She's about, I think, 12, 13, and he's younger, 10 at the most.
10, yeah.
And she basically sends him to a sweet shop to cause a distraction so that she can shoplift. He's supposed to come out to meet her. He's supposed to go in and pretend that he's lost his dad. She waits for him to come out, but he doesn't. She goes in to look for him, and the shopkeeper's, his dad came in and got him. And this is,
it's just like, oh shit, something has gone horrifyingly wrong.
Yeah, and this is set that this scene is set at about 1995, I think, and it's supposed to be like one of a series of disappearances of young children. Now, again, this is something that has real resonance, particularly for people who in Britain and particularly in my part of the world as well, I think, because it's very much, it's not so much based on the Moors murders, but it's very, very much
reminiscent of
them. And I don't know how well known that case is outside the UK, how well known it is in the States, but just for the benefit of anyone who's not familiar, the Moors murders happened about 1964-65. 5 young people between the ages of 10 and 17 were abducted, sexually assaulted, and murdered. And the last one was how the killers were caught. The other 4 were buried on Saddleworth Moor after being fairly monstrously abused. And it's set a whole bunch of shockwaves, partly, I think, because even the idea of serial killers was the term hadn't even. It
was a very new thing, but also it was particularly horrifying because it involved such young people, but also because it was a couple.
Yeah,
and it was essentially Ian Brady and Myra Hindley had come together on the bases of their mutual fucked up fetishes, and they enabled each other into this horrifying thing.
Yeah, and there was the sadistic murder of young children. There was the fact that one of the killers was a woman. And I know of two people who've been kind of tangentially. I've known 2 people who were kind of tangentially impacted by the case. I went to college with a woman who knew the family of Keith Bennett. He was one of the victims. I think can't remember if he was the youngest. He was about 10, I think. Yeah. And he's the only one whose body has never been recovered. It's still out there on the moors somewhere.
That's right. Yeah, and so the fact that that resonance makes itself into the Moor, because the Moor is driven by a man who is obsessed with finding his son's body.
Yeah, because in this iteration or this particular, I mean, we never find out very much about the killer. We don't even know his name.
No.
We certainly never see him. But the bodies have never been found. He's been given a life sentence of presumably, I think he was only convicted of one killing or something. We're not quite sure what.
Yeah,
but there is,
I think they found one body.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And he was on his way to bury the body, maybe.
Yeah.
Because there's a very, very brief flash, and this is right in the beginning, so it's not a spoiler. A very, very brief flash of a child with a bag over their head. And I think that it's on the basis of that he got a life sentence, a sentence.
Yeah, and we're told it's actually getting to the point where he's going to be released. And so the father of the boy who disappeared in the opening shot, who has a sort of close relationship with the girl who was with him.
That's right.
It's partly about trying to find out what happened to his son, but it's also partly about ensuring that, in the hope that if he can find his son's body, he can prevent the killer being released. Yeah,
absolutely.
It's very, very, it's the kind of film which works because of its characters and which works because of the performances. And this is a cast not a particularly well known, a very, very strong but not particularly well known cast. The best known actor actually is the late Bernard Hill. This is actually his penultimate role. He appeared in the TV series The Responder after this, but this was pretty much the last thing he did, and he plays the sort of the investigating officer from the original case.
There's this amazing moment, which again happens pretty early on, where he shows us how big the Moor actually is.
Yes,
they've been working off of the father has been working off of one map.
That's what it says. We weren't even looking there here, and he basically gets about half a dozen more maps and spreads them out. This is where we're looking.
The Moor. It's like all of this is the Moor.
So the father, Bill, is played by David Edward Roberts, and there's Claire, who is the young woman. That's Sophia Laporta. She's agreed to help him. She has a podcast. She's
that's right. It's one of the things that he says he admires about her is that she refuses to talk about the one thing that would get her podcast a lot of ears, a lot of likes, and to some degree, I think she refuses to talk about it because she still feels very guilty. About what happened.
Yes. But, one of the reasons they have a bond is he's never seemingly blamed her for it. He's actually always, in fact, almost been something of a surrogate father to her.
Yes. We never see her parents. She says they were never around. And Bill has, in a lot of ways, become her father. And they are bonded because of this grief. They are bonded because of this loss. Yeah,
very much so. It is very much about how these things affect you. As I said, the woman I went to college with was, she talked about, I remember her talking to me about how Keith Bennett's family had been affected by what had happened. She said they'd never really recovered. I think, his mother died some years ago now, but I think almost until she died, she and his brother would go out to the moor regularly in an attempt to try and find the grave, but she never did. And the brother, I think, had actually, because of the two killers, Ian Brady essentially said, he didn't want to be released. In fact, he kept demanding the right to die, and there were probably plenty of people who would have quite happily done that for him. no one did. Whereas Myra Hindley was constantly claiming to have converted to Christianity and trying to get released. And I remember apparently Keith Bennett's mother had vowed that if she ever was released, he had vowed to basically hunt her down and kill her.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard not to. I mean, there is that whole kind of thing. I've always they taped at least one of their murders, the murder of Leslie Ann Downey, who was 10, and I have read a transcript of that tape.
Yep. And you kicked it over to me, and I read it. And I had read Emlyn Williams' book, Nothing But the Night, which is his sort of book about particularly the trial, because I think he attended the trial. And I certainly knew some things, but and also Colin Wilson has written about the Moor's murders as well.
Yeah, the first time I read the chat, because I've always been quite. One of the reasons I didn't I wasn't a very good actor was I always struggled to kind of understand what was kind of going on in the script. I'd read the words and it's kind of what does that mean? What's it?
Yeah.
And so the first time I read it, I'm not quite sure what's going on. And then when I read it again, and it was kind of like, oh Jesus, you realise what was happening.
Yeah.
And I don't believe in the death penalty, but the other person I knew whose life had been affected by he's kind of been touched, and this is kind of a weird one because she wasn't born until 10 years later. My friend Vicky Morris is an extremely good poet, and this was the opening poem of her collection, If All This Never Happened.
Hi there, this is Vicky Morris. Thanks for inviting me on, Simon. I'm just going to read a poem about my first name. So I'm normally Vicky, but my actual first name is Leslie. And this is a poem, I think, that, the sad story behind it, I think, has always kind of coloured, to some extent, my perception of the world and my poetry as well. This is called Leslie. In memory of Leslie Ann Downey, 1954 to 1964. Sometimes I tell the story of my namesake, how my mother, when she was Nurse Margaret, met a young policeman in the hospital staff room, raw from listening to the evidence at Chester Assizes, the 16-minute tape that had to sit through, found in an old suitcase, station lost property, its ticket in the spine of a prayer book, how he sat and wept in his dark uniform, and she made him sugary tea. How I was named for Leslie, for her 10 short years, for her joy at the Ancoats Boxing Day fair, for her wide-eyed trust of the world, her tartan frock, pink cardi, and red shoes, for how she called to God for mummy. And I picture my mother sat there listening, her hand on his hand, the other on her belly, me not yet kicking. She said she wanted to bring her back. She wanted to bring her home.
So there's this human darkness, and then there is this inhuman darkness, because often I find myself in that place. It's funny. It was Twin Peaks that first made me think this. The whole idea of producing Garmin Bosia and for creatures from outside space and time that eat it, pain and suffering. Yeah. And, so is it worse if something comes from the outside inside of you and makes you fucking kill your daughter? Or is it worse if you just, for some reason,
I've just finished reading actually just today, kind of like finished it in this absolutely frantic verse because I was absolutely riveted. Stephen King's novel Holly. It's one of her latest one featuring Holly Gibney, and her previous outings were like in Mr. Mercedes and so forth. And if it leads, she hasn't, and in The Outsider, she's often been facing supernatural evil. But one of the things she is kind of processing in this is the fact that there's no supernatural element to this. The monstrousness that she's been had to deal, been kind of confronting in this is it's all human. There doesn't need, there's no supernatural element required. It's just entirely what a couple of sick fucks have effectively done. I think one of the things with the Moor, and one of the ways that makes it work very powerfully and effectively, because in a way that thing of like this Moor's murders like almost not mythology, but this is like it's a bad thing that's happened.
It's an echoing, it's a resonance, it's a reference, it's a, you can begin with it and then spiral outwards from it.
Yes.
And spiral back into it.
You're very much, if it is folk horror, those elements are very, very, at first, they're very much subsumed into a study of and the after effect of human evil and its after effects and its lingering impact.
And that innate thing that we all have to say, surely just a person could not have come up with this for just person reasons. It must be something more. It must be darkness putting us on like a hand puppet and making us do these things. And the landscape of the Moor is such a sense of deep time, mainly because of all the peat bogs. There is this real sense that things simply get sucked down, and if there was stuff there, it may not be there anymore, but it's still in the landscape.
It's in the land. And this is an ancient landscape. This has been, when you look at this place, because obviously,
and it's been the same for all this time because no one can build on it. No one can,
and it's a genuinely dangerous place, just a physically dangerous place. That it's they have to, Bill and Claire. And there's a ranger called Liz who basically is guiding them out there, and she's got various, supplies and whatnot, and materials to say, right, okay, you follow me, you walk here, you watch where you step, because there are peat bogs that will suck you down. There are the groffs, the kind of the channels that you can just fall. It's kind
almost
of
like cracks in the land.
Yeah. Like gullies, little ravines almost that you could just fall into.
You won't see them because they're completely, the tops are completely level with the rest of the landscape. There's mist.
Yes.
Everywhere. There's
the use of mist in this film really deserves a mention, because they're the director's been brilliant at this mist will just come in, and in a moment this landscape will just disappear, and all you can see is this very reduced area. Or there's a wonderful moment where Claire is sort of on the moor, she's panicking, she's terrified, she feels like she's never going to go. She runs and her feet come onto the roadway, and she's standing there for a moment, and slowly the mist disperses and she's standing on a road.
Yes.
And it's very much this thing of here's this road, here is the modern world. There's quite a few moments where the camera pauses and her feet are at the edge of the road, and you're crossing, and something we've talked about a lot in this podcast in terms of horror is horror as the idea of it's a place where you cross the boundary, you cross over from what we know into somewhere where we shouldn't maybe be.
Yeah, somewhere where we shouldn't, where it is impossible to be. The Moor is a liminal space. The Moor is, it's modern and it's ancient. It's dead and it's alive. It's everything is possible and everything is impossible. There's so much resonance for the movie to play with, and so many echoes, whether it be literature, whether it be film, whether it be just a sense of I I moved across this barrier. I moved through this channel, and suddenly I am somewhere where no one should be.
Yeah.
I'm not where I thought I was going to be. I am lost. And I could be lost between this step and this step.
Yeah. And in the same way, it is this very sort of slow kind of seepage or osmosis where where elements of the supernatural work its way into something that has been very, very human and very grounded in. Because, I mean, in
reality, because,
yeah.
you know, even that fear that overtakes her is an understandable fear. It is a fear of being in this landscape. It is a fear of being, you know, completely threatened by knowledge and lack of knowledge.
Yes. And one of the things, again, it's this. I mean, there was the sheer vastness of them all in relation to the human scale, in relation to how do you find it. It is something that really makes you realize how tiny and insignificant a single person is. No matter how much you love them, no matter how vital they are to you personally. As far as this Moor is concerned, where do you even begin to look for the body of one child?
Yes.
And Bill has enlisted the help of a dowser called Alex, who uses a pendulum with the map to sort of give some indication of where he thinks he might dig. But Alex also has a daughter, Eleanor, who has considerably greater ability with this.
I mean, she's very definitely a pure psychic. She could be a medium. She could, you know, she hears the dead. She sees the dead.
But it also takes much more of a toll on her.
Oh yeah.
she's got a much better, more heightened sensitivity, a much better chance of being able to find this missing child. But at the same time, it's much more damaging. She's also a lot more kind of idealistic and altruistic and genuinely wants to help. Her father's the one who's actually having kittens at the prospect of
because he knows. I mean, I don't know. He says that it's not because of him that she is the way that she is. So I can only assume that something happened to her mother.
There was some mention that her mother actually had considerably. There was something that she had some sort of real, much greater sort of natural ability, and that it's sort of been kind of inherited from her. And Chris Cronin, who both wrote and directed this, has done this again. It's a beautifully judged and balanced script with beautiful. I mean, there is that kind of thing of the vulnerability of children and and the desire of parents to protect them, and just how and the limitations of that. And
exactly. How impossible that becomes, and how impossible children can make that.
Yes, because
if you allow them to choose for themselves and define themselves as adults.
Yes, because especially when you're young as well. You because especially before a certain age, you think you're goddamn immortal. You know, we've all, I think, but nearly all of us have done stuff when we're in our teens or our 20s. I'm sure there's probably at least one thing in all of our teens or 20s where we look back and say, what the fuck was I thinking? I could have been killed.
Yes. Yeah, more than one thing. And you know, as the mother of a child who is special, I understand Alex real well. There's a grief and a mystery and a longing and a hunger for meaning that lays on this film in layers. And, you know, and really is essentially, it's like, you know, the the basic problem of is there a point to death? Is there a point to living if we know that we're going to die?
Yeah.
That we could die? Is there a point to opening our eyes to the light when we know that the dark waits behind our lids every time that we shut them again? And you know, this idea of this brief blink, this brief dream that we emerge into. And, more and more, I think that Neolithic people understood this, prehistoric people understood this, all people understood this, Australopithecus understood this.
Oh God, yeah.
We get the little people, the very, very little people.
I mean, it's kind of, there's this kind of thing that we talked about this when we did our podcast on folk horror, which is and the kind of connections between folk and cosmic horror, parallels, because the idea that the horror of cosmic horror is that there is nothing behind everything, that there is no meaning, there is no,
nothing matters.
There is that vastness of, like, in the equivalent in the terms of this film, there is just the vastness and emptiness and desolation of the Moor. That just, it's just a place, and horrible shit will happen here.
The same way that an area can be called the desolation, like the desolation of Smaug.
And the same, again, on the one level, on the purely natural level, it's not about any kind of malign purpose. It's just that it doesn't give a shit. It's indifferent. You have no meaning or place within it. You're just something that happens to be crawling there, and you might be lucky and be okay, or you might be unlucky and not. And that is the terror of cosmic horror. And then you have the terror of folk horror, which is that there is something behind everything. There is an order, there is a purpose, but it's not necessarily what you had in mind at all.
No, exactly. I mean, and how would you worship something like that? How would you get it to pass you by?
And there's the nature. What is, and what is the nature of worship and something like that? It's not the worship as we know it. In a Christian sense, it is the worship. It is appeasement. It's
appeasement. It's abasement. It is allow me to live, allow other children to live, allow other people to live.
Yeah.
What can I do on behalf of my species, my tribe, to
not
let
be
the night let the night roll on? And even if it comes back every night like a wave, to let this emptiness and this awfulness and this darkness.
And because in all this emptiness, you do find these traces of some sort of meaning. You find these standing stones, these megaliths, and with these this recurrent pattern of 5 concentric circles on it, which clearly means something.
I mean, it's like, is it a stone thrown in the water and ripples going outward? Is it concentric circles of deep time?
Yeah.
There was something at the beginning, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
When will it come back in?
Yeah.
Who knows? But yeah, there is this real feeling that once upon a time, somebody had an explanation. Somebody thought they had an explanation, and they thought that there was something that could be done. And, the peat bog is very resonant in terms of that, because we all know about bog bodies. And the idea
holds things from the past. It preserves things from the past.
Yes, it holds things from the past. It preserves things from the past. But better yet, that people were deliberately sunk into peat bogs so that they would be preserved, and that they were deliberately sunk into peat bogs after having been sacrificed, given the triple death, and part of the triple death was to be strangled, to be smothered, and perhaps to be cut.
Yeah. I mean, again, as I say, the supernatural elements of it are very, very low key and restraining. A good way into the. I mean, you have the sort of the use of the guy using this pendulum, which at first, and again, it's very ambivalent whether whether it's doubting whether there's any kind of real supernatural force or involved or not. And then we start to have, and then when the young girl gets involved and starts to bring her and again both very and another pair of very strong actors,
Incredible.
Mark Peachy, who plays Alex the father, and Elizabeth Dormer Phillips, who plays Eleanor, both, you know, superb. And so's and of course so's Vicky Hackett, who plays Liz, the ranger.
Yes.
Takes in there again. It's a very, very tight, very strong central cast here. I think when Eleanor starts to use the pendulum, we see the pendulum start to move in ways that
physically can't be done.
Yeah, not if just a person's twizzling it between the fingers, kind of thing. And that leads them out into the moor, and it's eventually when they get in the moor, eventually they begin to encounter something that is not at all human. Yeah.
It's inexplicable by human means. And, you know, I don't want to go too far in that direction because this is such a beautifully paced film.
God,
I was fascinated by, you know, often, particularly with a film of this type, you will have moments where things slow down.
Yeah.
There's no moments where things slow down here.
No, it's a very taut film, and
as
I say, because it's so grounded in the psychological realism of it, of what these characters are going through, of this past trauma, of this very human past trauma in what's in the very recent, historically speaking, the very recent past, and then having that sort of deepen into this almost geological level of time. And then, when there are really only two big supernatural scenes in the film.
Yeah.
And when they come, because of all that's gone before, all you've been grounded with, they are terrifying.
Yes, absolutely terrifying. You know, and I don't say that lightly because let's face it, I immerse myself in this shed. I swim in it all the time.
We see a lot of scary stuff. Moor is authentically frightening. It is authentically atmospheric and powerful and mesmerizing and driven by astonishingly good script writing and direction and performances,
and
all across the
emotions board that we all can. I mean, unless we're assholes or young, like super young, you know, the kind of thing where it's like, stop it. It's like, stop trying to make me feel something. You know, I was that bitch at one point in my life.
Yes, we often have been.
Yeah, but yeah, if you allow the hook of this to penetrate, it's going to sink deep.
Yeah,
and it will pull you, and that's what I like.
Yeah, it's like it's a horror film. It's a human drama in many ways, about grief and mortality and how we deal with that. Because I mean, there is that buzzword that flies around a lot, of closure, and you know, really, what does that mean? What can that mean, especially when dealing with something like the loss of a child?
Yeah.
You know, how do you fucking live with it?
One of the reasons we reject closure is the reason that, you know, that this movie works as well as it does is because there is no closure to life.
No.
Or rather, there is only one type of closure to life.
Yeah, and you kind of think of that line in Exorcist 3. You know, it all where the priest says to sort of George C. Scott, it all works out when the end of time, as soon as that. You know?
Oh, so soon.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it is that thing where you have people are kind of where people carry that, and it's also it's about the toll it takes on the relationships, which might otherwise be a source of healing to you, or at least a way of going on and having a life.
Where's that line from? Hope will kill you. But yeah, it is very much like that, because hope is pain. Hope is grinding your skin over a stone again and again and again, tenderizing yourself and re-tenderizing yourself.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's if you just give up in despair, then life gets on one level at least life's a lot easier, because you're not being tormented by the idea it might get better.
Yeah.
I just probably also need to mention that Cronin does an astonishing job of making sheep deeply fucking sinister. That has got to be said.
Yes, I
never
mean,
seen such
every
fucking
time
sinister sheep.
that we keep going back and going like, oh, 1 sheep, 2 sheep, 3 sheep. Just that moment where Bill like looks over and we don't even see them, and he's like, they like to stare, don't they? It's like, oh yeah, they do.
They do. If they have eyes, because we also have sheep with there's eyes. 1 sheep, 2 sheep, 3 sheep with no fucking eyes. What the goddamn hell is going on here?
Yeah, I mean, there is a moment where I genuinely felt maybe we had done like a Nigel Neal and we'd just gone into a different dimension where it would be night forever.
I mean, there is that thing of, and again, it's something that it's one of these things where the cosmic and the folk horror traditions kind of overlap, in the sense that there is that one of the supernatural scenes on the Moor is one where reality itself seems to be kind of shifting a little bit, where someone is somewhere where they couldn't have been, and there were voices that go and
things become unhinged, and there's I mean I think we talked about stigma, that
Ghost Story for Christmas.
Yeah, Ghost Story for Christmas, and part of what makes stigma work for me is this sense of something repeating itself over and over and over again, like a signal coming out of the past, that you walk through, like a broadcast that you walk through, and you don't understand what you've done, and you will never understand what you've done, but you moved the stone and now you're going to bleed to death.
Yes.
It's like,
I mean, on one level, there's the kind of the terror that happens on the Moor, where, as I say, reality seems to be shifting, where, hang on, there is something there that wasn't before. On the one hand, there is the fear of being lost in this vast open space where all, to use a phrase I've used several times before all the accoutrements of civilization and technology are stripped away from you, and you're just this poor bare forked thing upon the dull earth kind of thing. Yes. Whereas that is on that level, there is, which is almost like there's the thing where is reality sort of warping and shifting because you've stepped into this other worldly domain, or is it just that you're lost in the emptiness of of the real world, this big empty space,
and your mind is moving around inside of your body because you are so divorced from everything that you've known. And I'm going to mention one more film that I saw fairly recently, which has some, I believe some resonance with this one, which is Out of Darkness, which is a Neolithic thriller.
Okay.
Yes. If you haven't seen this, do see it. Out of Darkness involves a very, very small group of Homo sapiens, sort of a sub-tribe of Homo sapiens, who have made an ocean journey or a sea journey. They have arrived at a place that they hope will be better than the place that they left, and a landscape that will be friendlier for them. The entire film is done in a conlang that someone came up with, which works really, really well as prehistoric language, as Neolithic language. Everybody in it is just mixed enough, just human enough, and a great actor and wonderful at physical stuff. And it becomes, somebody said, well, I was hoping it would be a monster movie, but that's just me on Letterboxd. And I was like, no, you don't get it, motherfucker. This is a monster movie. Except the ultimate monstrousness of humanity, where humans who will see each other as either family or alien, and what happens when that starts to shift, when it's like all I'm going to say is somebody gets killed that they think will never get killed, cannot possibly get killed, and a second after going, how could so and so get killed, you can see them all thinking, and eventually someone says, well, now we've got something to eat.
There is that thing of, of human monstrousness and what people are capable of doing, where in a way that kind of comes full circle in the Moor.
Yes.
Territory.
Yeah. I think that's, yeah. That's, without spoilers, that is absolutely true.
Yeah, it starts out with what seems to be simple human monstrousness, slowly deepens into something bigger and darker and more ancient, and eventually comes full circle into a form of that human monstrousness which is different and yet the same.
Yes.
All of which sounds very cryptic, but we're trying not to fucking spoil things here for you guys.
As you say, why do we do sacrifice? Many times for appeasement, but also for reward.
Yeah.
And so I think that actually those two films would make a very interesting pairing. It would make a very interesting double bill.
Who's the director of this?
Andrew Cumming. It's English. Was released in 2022. But a disparate gang of early humans band together in search of new land and find themselves confronting something that they don't understand. I don't know how many films Andrew Cumming has made, but it's entirely possible that it might be his first feature as well. But there's a real resonance between these two films.
So Eyes of the Darkness, directed by Andrew Cumming, that's another recommendation. But first and foremost,
the Moor.
It's written and directed by Chris Cronin.
Yes.
With, as I say, with a fantastic cast: Sophia Laporta, David Edward Robertson, Elizabeth Dormer Phillips, Mark Peachy, Vicky Hackett, and in one of his final roles, the late great Bernard Hill. It really is. It was definitely a film I wanted to watch. It has, having watched it, I think I can say that being given a chance to sort of give it a sneak preview and get a chance to actually sort of signal boost it as it comes out is actually a privilege. Really, really. So I would definitely want to reiterate my thanks to Rebecca Cherry and Keir Waller at Strike Media for letting us see.
This is the best thing about loving a genre, and better yet, loving a type of thing is when people give you the opportunity to support it and to uplift it, hopefully. Just go out of your way, man. It's so worth your time. Even if you don't love it as much as we do, it is so worth your time.
Yeah, if you like intelligent horror, if you like folk horror, if you like dark, moody, atmospheric stuff, if you like these scenes that absolutely fuck with your head and scare the crap out of you, then you will very, very probably want to go and see the Moor. I had to see it on the small screen. I had to watch it on my laptop. If you have a chance to see it on the big screen at the cinema, then you are very, very lucky.
I always remember Stephen King talking about having seen oh God, what is that movie with the blind lady?
Wait Until Dark.
Wait Until Dark. Yeah, exactly. Seeing Wait Until Dark, I don't know what that's about. Seeing Wait Until Dark in a theater that was so shitty that the exit lights were out, and every time the screen went dark, that was bad, he said. That was a really bad time. And I'm like, but I'll bet that was a really excellent time too. It's the way in which I would have liked to have seen the Moor.
Yeah, I mean, some films it's a film that I really love to see on the big screen. I mean, some films can often work better on the small screen. I think Blair Witch Project is possibly the most terrifying way to watch the Blair Witch Project is alone in a house at night on your TV, because this is basically a series of cut together video footage that somebody's found, and that is a very good way. As I said, I once had the experience of watching that alone at our house late at night, and it was kind of like, well, I'm glad I did. I'm also rather regretting having done so, because I have to try and go to sleep now.
Absolutely. But this isn't found footage. It has aspects, but it isn't found footage, and that's why the full immersion in the bath of dark peat that is the Moor.
Well, I mean, part of the power of the film is this huge landscape that's it's flat, it's endless, stretching out as far as the eye can see, completely desolate, completely hostile to human life. You are alone out here. You are negligible. You are nothing. And the world you are a part of, the world of cars and electronics and central
might as well be gone.
Technology. Yeah, it's like you slipped through a crack in time, and here you are in another
exactly
another
it.
place.
And you have to only have faith that it's not gone.
Yeah. If you are very, very fucking lucky, you may find your way back.
Yes.
But don't bet on it.
Exactly. So the Moor, go see it.
Yeah, it's a fantastic movie. Really one of the best horror films I've seen in a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's pretty much all we can.
Basically, yeah. And God, yeah. So, I remain Gemma Files.
And I have been Simon Bestwick.
And this, of course, is still No Darkness.
No darkness.
But ours.
The tone.